Flight attendant kicks off black passenger not knowing she's the airline CEO. Airplanes are supposed to bring people closer, bridging distant lands and cultures. But on this fateful Delta Airlines flight from New York to San Francisco, the cabin turned into a stage for a startling, career-ending drama. Witnesses would later recall the electric tension that crackled in the air, the whispers that spread like wildfire down the rows. A single moment of shocking cruelty, a slap heard around the cabin, would expose hidden prejudices and power struggles lurking beneath corporate suits. Hello friends, if you new here then don't forget to hit subscribe button, and if you like then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you from watching this video. Little did one flight attendant know that her victim, a poised black passenger with an unassuming smile, was none other than Delta's newly appointed CEO, and she was far from powerless. At Terminal 4 of John F. Kennedy International Airport, a restless crowd of travelers gathered near Gate B28. The digital display overhead flashed in bold letters, Delta Flight 1730, New York JFK to San Francisco Airport, boarding in 45 minutes. Mothers were juggling fussy toddlers, business travelers tapped away on their laptops, and vacationers tried to find space for their surfboards and stuffed duffel bags. Amid this chaotic scene, two figures stood out, each in their own distinct way. First, there was Denise Marshall, a reserved, elegant black woman with long braids coiled into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. She wore a tasteful navy blue pantsuit, a crisp white blouse beneath, and minimal jewelry, a single pearl bracelet on her left wrist. Her posture was impeccable, and she had an aura of calm that made passers-by look at her twice. But they had no idea that she was far more than just another passenger. For the past year, Denise had been working her way up to become Delta Airlines' new chief executive officer, having started as interim CEO after a major leadership shakeup. That day, she'd chosen to fly economy incognito, for a reason. On the surface, it was a routine business trip to finalize corporate expansions in the Bay Area. But in reality, she wanted an unfiltered view of her airline's customer experience. Then there was Martha Perry, a flight attendant known among her peers for her brash personality and a certain impatience that often bordered on unprofessional. Though experienced, Martha had found herself passed over for promotions multiple times because of complaints regarding her attitude. In fact, just a week earlier, she had been reprimanded by her supervisor for being rude to an elderly passenger. But Martha was in a foul mood that afternoon. Her day had begun with a delayed commute, and she'd had overhead bin space fiascos on her last flight. She was, in short, on edge, and everyone around her could sense it. Denise and Martha were about to intersect in a way that would reverberate through the entire airline for years to come. As Denise moved through the terminal, her sharp eyes observed every detail: the new self-check-in kiosks that sometimes jammed, the single-file line near the coffee stand, and the snaking queue at Gate B28. She noticed a few employees in passing. Some were enthusiastic and courteous, but others looked overworked and weary. This was exactly why she had decided to fly incognito, to better understand the day-to-day reality of Delta's operations and discover how to improve them. She felt optimistic. Despite many challenges in the airline industry, she believed Delta could soar to new heights, if handled with compassion, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to equality and customer satisfaction. At the gate, an older couple approached the podium, worried because they had not been assigned seats together. Denise watched as the gate agent, a young man with a bright smile named Louis, kindly reassured them he would find a solution. The couple left relieved, and Louis typed furiously at his keyboard to rearrange seats. Denise stepped forward to scan her boarding pass. She offered Louis a smile and a soft thank you, and Louis smiled back. "Have a great flight, Miss Marshall," he said, handing her back the slip. She continued into the jetway, out of earshot, before anyone could make the connection that D. Marshall was actually Delta's new CEO. When she finally entered the Boeing 767, she was greeted by a uniformed flight attendant at the door. This was not Martha Perry, but another attendant, Clara Suarez, who had a warm presence. Clara offered a standard greeting, "Welcome aboard, ma'am." Your seat is down the aisle to the right. Denise smiled appreciatively, stepping into the narrow aisle. It was a relief not to be recognized. As far as the airline employees knew, the new CEO was traveling on a different plane on the same route, or perhaps wasn't flying at all. Denise had deliberately kept her itinerary ambiguous, preventing staff from making special arrangements or fawning over her. She wanted authenticity. And that was exactly what she was about to get, though certainly not in a way she had hoped. Farther toward the back of the cabin, passengers were already complaining. Martha Perry was fussing about luggage, a stern look etched across her face, a look that usually discouraged anyone from asking for help. But a couple of travelers mustered the courage to request additional space for their bags, to which Martha responded sharply, "We all have baggage, and we all have to deal with the limited space. Kindly find room or check it at the front if you can't manage." Her tone was biting, and the passenger, startled, muttered an apology before attempting to cram a small roller bag under the seat in front of him. Martha sighed dramatically. She had been working for the airline for nearly 15 years, believing that her seniority should grant her more respect. But from her perspective, the airline never fully appreciated her. She often blamed her missed promotions and lack of recognition on politics, never reflecting on her own attitude problems. Denise found her seat in economy, 34B, a middle seat. She stowed her carry-on under the seat, making sure to adhere to the guidelines. Then she buckled up and prepared for takeoff, noticing how the seats were narrower than she remembered from her earlier days. She made a mental note to review seat comfort in economy class during her next operations meeting. Martha, continuing her pass down the aisle, stopped just short of Denise and sighed again. "Please fasten your seat belt," she barked, even though Denise had already done so. Then her eyes flicked over Denise with a slight air of dismissiveness. She turned abruptly, continuing her mechanical checks, ensuring tray tables were up and seats were in the upright position for takeoff. Denise noticed the tension in Martha's voice but decided to let it go. She was here to observe, not to confront. As the plane taxied down the runway, Denise closed her eyes, reflecting on the burdens of her new position. She was Delta's first black female CEO, an achievement that felt both exhilarating and daunting. She'd long championed diversity and equality in her previous roles. Taking on the top leadership job, she planned to highlight and reward those who treated passengers and employees alike with dignity, while also addressing the pockets of prejudice and negativity that persisted in any large organization. If people like Martha existed on her staff, she would handle it in the right manner, corrective training or disciplinary action, if necessary. But only if they proved unwilling to embrace the fundamental ethic of respect. Her seat vibrated slightly as the pilot eased the plane off the ground. The cabin filled with that familiar rush of air and engine roar. Denise felt a surge of excitement. She always loved takeoffs, the moment the aircraft parted ways with the solid earth, entering a realm of possibility. She peered out her window. Even though she was in the middle seat, she craned her neck to see past the passenger by the window. There it was, the breathtaking sprawl of New York City, shrinking into tiny, toy-like buildings and lines of roads. An hour into the flight, beverage service began. Clara and Martha pushed the metal cart down the aisle, offering soft drinks, coffee, tea, or water. Clara's voice was calm, with a hint of cheer, while Martha's was clipped, as though she just wanted to get the service over with. Denise quietly asked for sparkling water and a small packet of almonds. Clara handed them over graciously. Martha barely looked at her. Unbeknownst to Martha, the passenger in 34B was carefully absorbing every interaction, every tone of voice. Denise scribbled mental notes, offer training on conflict resolution. Evaluate staff courtesy in economy. Check if attendants have adequate breaks, they seem stressed. She also saw glimpses of real dedication, from Clara and from the polite gate agent, Louis. But for Martha, the frustration and lack of kindness were glaring. A few hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed, and many passengers tried to nap. Denise, not one to sleep easily on planes, opened her laptop to review a slideshow about Delta's upcoming expansion in the Pacific region. Dim overhead lights flickered, and the rustle of blankets and the hum of the engines created an almost lulling atmosphere. No one could imagine that soon, a moment of violence would jolt them from this peace. Despite the subdued environment, Martha's voice still occasionally cut through the hum, either telling passengers to put their seats upright or asking them to quiet their children. She was especially curt with a young black mother of two energetic boys. The children were giggling, flipping through the in-flight magazine, and occasionally squealing at funny pictures. Rather than addressing them kindly, Martha rolled her eyes and spat, "Calm them down or I'll have to move you." The mother, mortified, tried her best to hush the boys, who were merely being playful. Denise turned her head at the commotion and caught Martha glaring at the young mother with exasperation. It left a sour taste in Denise's mouth. She knew flight attendants had challenging jobs, but there was a line between being firm for safety reasons and acting downright nasty. Seeing the tension, Clara intervened. She leaned over, crouching to the children's eye level. "Hi there," she said softly. "Would you like a coloring page? I think I can find some crayons for you." The children nodded enthusiastically, brightening at her kindness. Their mother, relieved, thanked Clara profusely. Martha scowled. "We're not running a daycare," she muttered, turning away. But Clara pretended not to hear. She just carried on rummaging through a small kit she kept for exactly these moments. Denise felt grateful for Clara's presence, an employee who understood that sometimes, a little kindness went further than barking orders. Then came lunchtime. Delta's economy meal service was in progress. Martha grew increasingly testy, complaining under her breath about the unnecessary fuss over dietary restrictions. Denise politely requested a vegetarian meal she had pre-ordered online, only to receive a skeptical grunt from Martha. "It might not even be on board," Martha said dismissively. Denise, deciding not to escalate, replied, "I ordered it weeks ago, but if it's not there, I'll just take the regular meal and skip the meat, if possible." Martha answered with a huff. "I'll check." Then she stormed off with the cart. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Clara returned with a neatly packaged vegetarian meal. "Here you go, ma'am," she said warmly. "We found it in our special meals cart. Apologies for the confusion." Denise offered her a grateful smile, while Clara cast a knowing glance in Martha's. Tension simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for a spark. Halfway through the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, instructing everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seat belts. Denise closed her laptop and obliged. Several minutes passed as the plane jostled and swayed, a collective tension gripping the passengers. Martha marched down the aisle, double-checking overhead bins, seat belts, and making sure no one was in the lavatories. Suddenly, an unexpected lurch caused a laptop from the overhead bin to tumble out and land close to Denise's seat. The passenger who owned the laptop, a middle-aged man, apologized profusely. Denise reached for the device to prevent further damage. At that moment, Martha arrived, her eyes blazing. "Why is that bin open?" she barked, glaring at Denise. Although it clearly wasn't Denise's luggage, the man raised his hand. "It's my bag," he confessed. "It must have shifted in turbulence." Martha ignored him, focusing her eyes on Denise. "Next time, keep your belongings stowed properly," she snapped, her tone accusing. Denise, taken aback, calmly responded, "I believe this belongs to him, not me." "But you're right, it could have been secured better." The blame game might have ended there. But tension, and prejudice, can make small misunderstandings erupt like volcanoes. Martha was determined to lash out at someone. And in her frustration, she targeted Denise. "You people," she began, her voice laced with a venomous undertone, "always causing trouble on flights. Not following the rules. If you can't handle your stuff, maybe you shouldn't be flying in the first place. A hush fell over the nearby rows. The words, "you people," hung in the air like a sour stench. Denise stared at Martha, feeling a wave of anger surge within her. She was used to subtle racism in corporate corridors, small slights, coded language, but rarely this blatant. However, she steadied herself. This was not the time or place to reveal her identity as CEO. Instead, she spoke with measured calm. "That's uncalled for, and you know it." Martha's face reddened. "Excuse me," she spat. A few heads turned, startled by the confrontation. Nearby passengers inched away, uncertain whether to intervene. Meanwhile, Clara arrived, sensing trouble. "What's going on here?" she asked gently, placing a hand on Martha's shoulder as if to calm her. But Martha, fueled by pent-up rage and prejudice, shrugged Clara off and leaned closer to Denise. "You heard me," she hissed, eyes flashing with hostility. "You people think you own everything. Causing chaos. I'm done dealing with the likes of you." Before Denise could respond, turbulence rocked the plane again, jolting Martha forward. The movement caused her tray of drinks, she had been collecting cups, to clatter. One cup of juice spilled onto Denise's lap, staining her pristine pantsuit. There was a collective gasp from surrounding passengers. Denise jerked back, her eyes widening. "Ma'am, watch it," she exclaimed, her voice containing a mix of shock and anger. That was the final spark. Martha lost her temper completely. In an instant, she raised her hand and delivered a stinging slap across Denise's face. The cabin collectively froze in stunned silence. Denise's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning with shock and pain. The magnitude of what had just happened reverberated through the aisle, as if time had momentarily stopped. A passenger across the aisle exclaimed loudly, "Oh my God, did she just?" Another fumbled for their phone, not sure if they should record or intervene. A child started crying, startled by the sudden outburst. Denise felt tears prick her eyes, not just from physical pain, but from the humiliation and anger swirling inside her. She resisted the urge to strike back, to fling Martha's rage back at her. Instead, she took a deep, trembling breath. Clara, her eyes wide with horror, grabbed Martha's arm. "What did you just do?" Clara hissed. Martha's own face registered shock at her action, but it was quickly replaced by stubborn rage. She didn't even apologize. She tried to defend herself, stammering, she was being belligerent. By now, the commotion had drawn other flight attendants, including the head flight attendant and a couple of off-duty staff who happened to be passengers. They surrounded Martha and pulled her away. Denise pressed her hand against her stinging cheek, looking at Martha with a mixture of hurt and righteous anger. The entire row was speechless. The pilot's voice came on the intercom, demanding everyone remain seated due to turbulence, but the chaos in that section of the plane had escalated beyond seatbelts. When the turbulence subsided and the seatbelt sign was turned off, the head flight attendant, Roland Bates, took swift control of the situation. He escorted Martha to the galley, instructing her to remain there and not speak to any more passengers. Then Roland approached Denise, who was visibly shaken. "Ma'am, I apologize on behalf of Delta Airlines," he began, lowering his voice and kneeling beside Denise's seat to speak quietly. "Are you all right? That was completely unacceptable behavior, and we will file a report. You have every right to press charges if you want." Clara offered Denise a napkin with ice from the beverage cart to soothe her cheek. Denise pressed the cold cloth to her skin, trying to ease the sting. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm okay," she managed to say. "But this is far from over." Roland nodded in understanding. "Of course. I'm so sorry." He paused, then added, "If you would like to move to a different seat for the remainder of the flight, we have some open seats in business class." His voice was laced with guilt, as though he were trying to salvage some dignity for the airline. Before Denise could respond, a few of the surrounding passengers began chiming in, outraged by Martha's action and her prior comments. A tall man in a suit declared, "I've never seen anything like this. She needs to be fired." Another passenger, an older black woman, shook her head in dismay. "All my years flying, I've never witnessed such blatant disrespect." The young mother of two also spoke up. "She was so rude to us too. I can't believe she actually hit someone." Denise stood, deciding that continuing to hide her identity might only cause more confusion. She turned to Roland, her voice quiet but firm. "Roland, could I speak to the captain privately when it's safe to do so?" Roland raised a brow, puzzled. "Certainly, ma'am. But if you have a complaint, I can handle that. The captain is quite busy." She took a moment, struggling with whether this was the right time to reveal herself. But the magnitude of the incident required immediate action. "I'm aware. But believe me, I need to speak with him. And then I need to speak with corporate." Roland nodded, still looking confused. "I understand. I'll let him know." In that moment, Denise took a slow, deliberate breath. "Please also inform him that I am Denise Marshall, the recently appointed CEO of Delta Airlines." A hush fell over the small cluster of flight attendants and bystanders who overheard. Roland's face went pale. Even Clara's eyes widened. The surrounding passengers looked at each other in disbelief. Some recognized the name from recent headlines about diversity and corporate leadership. Others simply sensed the gravity of the situation. After a beat of stunned silence, Roland cleared his throat and said, I had no idea." "Of course, Miss Marshall. Let's go to the front of the plane right away." As they made their way to the forward galley, Denise could feel dozens of eyes on her. She moved through the aisle with her head held high, even though her cheek was still throbbing. The curious gazes followed her and whispers broke out. "She's the CEO. Oh my goodness, that flight attendant is in big trouble now. I didn't even know Delta had a new CEO." When Denise finally reached the cockpit door, Roland knocked and slipped inside, carefully explaining the situation. Moments later, the captain, Captain Ray McMillan, emerged. He was a graying man in his 50s with a calm demeanor that spoke of countless flight hours. "Miss Marshall," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "I am so sorry this happened on my flight. I will personally see to it that we take every measure to address this." Denise appreciated his sincerity. "Thank you, Captain. For now, please ensure that Miss Perry, Flight Attendant Martha Perry, doesn't have any further contact with passengers, especially me. Keep me updated if we need to divert the flight, but I think we can continue to San Francisco as planned. Once we land, I'll handle this internally. But I'll need a complete account from any staff or passengers who witnessed the incident." "Yes, ma'am," the captain replied. "I'll proceed as you advise. We're about 2 hours from arrival. We'll make sure she's not allowed to continue service in the main cabin." After the conversation, Roland escorted Denise to a vacant seat in business class, offering privacy, apologies, and the promise of immediate action. When Denise settled into the plush seat, she felt a surge of mixed emotions: anger, disappointment, embarrassment. She used the in-flight Wi-Fi to send a brief message to her closest advisor, Eva Townsend, alerting her to the incident. By the time they landed, it would already be in motion at Delta's corporate offices. There would be repercussions, serious ones. For the remainder of the flight, the cabin was eerily subdued. Martha Perry was essentially quarantined in the galley, not allowed to interact with passengers or continue the service. Clara and the other attendants took over the tasks. Word spread quickly about what had happened, so the entire plane seemed to vibrate with tension and gossip. Everyone understood that the situation was far from ordinary. This was not a simple outburst of a rude flight attendant. This was an assault, with a racial undertone, on the CEO of the airline. When the plane finally touched down at San Francisco International Airport, a wave of relief washed over everyone. As the passengers deplaned, many cast sympathetic glances in Denise's direction or whispered words of support. Some, emboldened, told her about their own negative experiences with Martha during the flight. A few even gave their business cards, offering to serve as witnesses if needed. Denise thanked them graciously, but her focus was on the next steps. She would have to file an official report, both from the perspective of a victim and the CEO. It was an unusual position to be in, but she knew she had to set an example for how Delta would respond to such egregious behavior once the other passengers had cleared out. Roland approached Denise again with a tremulous expression. "Miss Marshall, I can't tell you how sorry I am. I've arranged a private space where you can speak to Miss Perry if you wish, or just wait while she is escorted away. HR representatives and security have been contacted, as per protocol." Denise took a deep breath. "I need to speak to her. But please ensure security is present. This can't escalate further." Roland nodded, leading her to a quiet corner of the disembarkation area near a window overlooking the tarmac. 2 airport security officers stood nearby. Martha was already there, arms crossed tightly, her expression oscillating between fear and defiance. Clara stood several feet away, arms folded across her chest, glaring at her colleague with unmistakable disappointment. Denise approached, facing Martha. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Denise broke the silence, her tone measured but firm. "I want to hear if you have anything to say for yourself." Martha's initial response was to avert her gaze. When she did speak, her voice was laced with bitterness. "I'm sorry. It just got out of hand. You were raising your voice at me." Denise shook her head. "I never raised my voice. Not once. Even if I had, does that justify assaulting a passenger? Not to mention spewing racist remarks." Martha flinched at the word racist, but she refused to accept responsibility. I've had a rough day. You don't understand what it's like, dealing with hundreds of people every flight. And maybe I shouldn't have said what I said, but I'm no racist." Denise regarded her quietly. "I lead an entire company with more than 80,000 employees worldwide. I'm well aware of how stressful day-to-day operations can be. But let me make one thing clear, I have zero tolerance for violence and bigotry. Your actions were unprofessional, hateful, and entirely unacceptable." Martha's face paled. She shifted her weight, seemingly on the brink of tears or another outburst. "I've been with Delta for 15 years, she muttered. "You can't just fire me like that." "I'm not just the CEO right now, Miss Perry," Denise said, her voice resonating with a quiet power. "I'm also the passenger you assaulted. There are going to be both legal and professional consequences. The airline's legal team will be in touch with you, as will law enforcement, if I choose to press charges. You've put yourself in this position. No one else." Martha looked as though she wanted to retort, but under the watchful eyes of security, she had little room to maneuver. Finally, she stared down at the floor, silent. Denise thanked the security officers, indicating they could take Martha away. As the officers led her off, Martha cast one final, desperate glance back, as though hoping for mercy. She found none in Denise's eyes. Clara approached slowly. "Miss Marshall, I wanted to say, I hope you're okay. If you need a statement from me, I'll give it." Denise recognized the sincerity in Clara's words. She placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Thank you for stepping in when you could, and for treating our passengers with kindness. We'll be in touch." Clara nodded, stepping aside to let Denise pass. The weight of what had just happened pressed on Denise. She felt the adrenaline draining away, leaving her exhausted. As she left the restricted area, a black SUV waited to escort her to the corporate offices in downtown San Francisco. The driver opened the door, and she sank into the back seat, letting out a trembling breath. Her phone chimed. There were already dozens of emails, messages, and missed calls. The crisis had begun. By the time Denise arrived at the Delta corporate office in San Francisco, the news had already spread among the upper ranks. A small crowd of executives and staff had gathered in the lobby, anxiously waiting for her. Ava Townsend, her trusted advisor and head of PR, stepped forward. "Denise, oh my God, are you all right?" Ava's voice was filled with genuine concern. She had known Denise for years, long before she ascended to the seat. Denise forced a small smile. "I'm fine, just a little shaken. My cheek is still sore, but I'll live. Thank you for gathering everyone so quickly." Wordlessly, Ava guided Denise through the labyrinth of corridors until they reached a spacious conference room. There, a somber group of executives was waiting: General Counsel Mark Billings, Head of HR Felicia Green, Chief Operating Officer Jerome Lin, and a few other relevant leaders. The atmosphere was tense. Denise took a seat at the head of the table, dropping her purse gently on the floor. She inhaled deeply. "Let's not waste time," she began, her voice still measured but tinged with fatigue. "I was assaulted today by one of our flight attendants, Martha Perry. There are witnesses, both passengers and staff, and her behavior included racially charged remarks. This is not just a violation of company policy, it's criminal battery." The group exchanged grim looks. Ava took the lead on behalf of the crisis management team. "We have an internal investigative process to follow, and will cooperate fully with law enforcement if you choose to press charges, of course. From a PR standpoint, we need to formulate a strategy for how we're going to address this publicly." Denise nodded. "I plan to press charges. This can't go unrest. Moreover, I'm not just thinking about me, I'm thinking about the message it sends to all employees, especially those who have been on the receiving end of prejudice. We need to ensure that no one else is subjected to such treatment." Mark Billings, the General Counsel, cleared his throat. "Legally, we have grounds for immediate termination. This will also serve as a strong statement that Delta will not tolerate discrimination or violence of any sort. However, the union might push back, since flight attendants typically have union protection. We'll have to handle that aspect carefully." Felicia, the head of HR, chimed in. "I agree. We do need to follow due process, but it's fairly straightforward in a case like this. Assault is a terminable offense under any circumstances, and the racist remarks compound the severity. We'll proceed accordingly." Denise rubbed her forehead, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "All right. As for the media approach, I don't want us to hide this. We should be transparent. People will hear about it, there were far too many witnesses on the flight for this to stay under wraps. Let's be proactive. We'll issue a statement expressing our shock and regret, confirming we're taking swift action, and reinforcing our commitment to a safe, equitable environment for everyone." Ava nodded, scribbling notes. "Understood. I'll draft a statement. We'll also prepare you for any interviews that might follow. I suspect the press will pick this up quickly." Denise cast a weary glance around the table. "Thank you, everyone. This is going to be a test for our leadership, my leadership, but let's use it as an opportunity to show what Delta stands for." The meeting wrapped up. Ava lingered behind to walk Denise to her temporary corner office. Once inside, Denise collapsed into a chair, letting out a shaky breath. She pressed a palm to her cheek, remembering the sudden sharp sting of Martha's slap. Ava sat across from her, her face etched with concern. "You know," Ava said quietly, "you have every right to be furious and to take time off to recover from this emotionally." Denise allowed a bitter laugh to escape. "Time off? I just became CEO, Ava. If I disappear now, it'll look like I can't handle adversity. Also, we have so much work to do, expansions to finalize, staff reforms to implement. This incident just proves how much we need cultural sensitivity training across the board." No, I'm not going anywhere. Ava reached out and squeezed Denise's hand. I respect your decision, but promise me you'll let me handle as much as I can so you don't burn out. I promise, Denise said, managing a small smile. But first, let's do the right thing for our customers, our employees, and for anyone who's ever been mistreated because of the color of their skin. Within days, the story made headlines. Flight attendant allegedly assaults passenger who turned out to be airline CEO. Major news outlets picked it up, from CNN to local channels in Atlanta, where Delta's headquarters were based, and beyond. Social media went ablaze, with many users condemning the flight attendant's actions and praising Denise for her measured response. Corporate crises are like storms, the winds of public opinion can shift quickly. While some trolls claimed it was a setup or an attempt at publicity, the overwhelming sentiment was support for Denise. Hashtags like #NoRoomForHate and #FlyWithRespect started trending, with customers sharing their positive or negative experiences on Delta flights. Other airline CEOs even reached out privately to Denise, expressing solidarity and offering advice on how to navigate the storm. Meanwhile, a lawsuit had been filed against Martha Perry. Denise's legal counsel prepared statements and gathered witness testimonies. Martha, under the counsel of her union representative, tried to spin a tale of self-defense, claiming Denise was the aggressor. However, numerous witness accounts and even partial video footage from a passenger's phone told a different story. The evidence overwhelmingly showed that Martha was the initiator, culminating in the slap. Simultaneously, Delta's HR department finalized its internal investigation. Martha was terminated, and an official letter of separation was sent to her home address citing gross misconduct, assault, and violation of the airline's code of ethics. For Martha, the consequences were swift and severe. She faced possible jail time if convicted, and her 15-year career at Delta ended in disgrace. The union managed to secure some basic legal assistance for her, but the majority of staff and union members distanced themselves, unwilling to defend blatant violence and racist remarks. For Denise, each day was a balancing act between her CEO responsibilities and cooperating with legal proceedings. Cameras followed her whenever she entered or exited the Delta headquarters, but she maintained a poised, dignified demeanor, refusing to be drawn into sensational commentary. She granted one exclusive interview to a national morning show, where she calmly recounted what happened. As someone who's devoted my career to the airline industry, I love traveling and the potential it has to bring people of all backgrounds together, she said, her voice steady. What happened to me was horrifying. No passenger should ever be treated that way. The fact that I happen to be the CEO doesn't make it worse or better, it highlights that this could happen to anyone, and we must ensure it never happens again. The interview was lauded for its grace and integrity. A wave of public sympathy further buoyed her leadership standing. Investors, while initially nervous about the negative press, found reassurance in how swiftly and transparently Denise handled the crisis. Delta's board of directors publicly affirmed their confidence in her. Morale among employees was split. Some were shaken to discover that such deeply rooted prejudice could exist within their ranks, while others felt inspired by Denise's resolve and determined to uphold her vision of an airline that truly welcomed all. 3 weeks after the incident, a shocking new development surfaced. An anonymous tipster, claiming to be a longtime friend of Martha's, contacted Delta's HR department with disturbing information. They provided screenshots of a private social media group where Martha had apparently posted racist memes and hateful rants about various passengers over the years. Even a few of her co-workers were targeted, especially those of color or those she deemed unworthy of certain positions. The revelations created further outrage. While Martha was no longer employed at Delta, the internal question became, how had she managed to hide such attitudes for so long? Where had the background checks, performance reviews, and managerial oversight failed? Denise called another emergency meeting with the executive team. This is deeper than one employee's outburst, she said, placing printouts of the screenshots on the conference table. We have to take a hard look at our culture, our training, and our accountability measures. We can't let something like this happen again. The team nodded solemnly. Each department head shared ideas on how to enhance their hiring processes and mandatory training modules. Felicia from HR proposed a third-party audit of Delta's workplace environment, focusing on diversity and inclusivity. I'm in full support, Denise said. Transparency is non-negotiable. If we find any other employees harboring or spreading hateful ideologies, we need to address it immediately. Soon, a comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiative was launched across Delta. It included mandatory workshops, anonymous reporting tools, and a commitment from leadership to foster an environment where employees felt safe to speak out if they encountered discrimination. The company even set aside a significant budget for mental health support, aiming to provide resources for employees dealing with stress or personal issues that might negatively impact their work. As the initiative rolled out, some employees expressed skepticism, assuming it was just a corporate PR move. But Denise pushed her leadership team to engage with staff on all levels, from flight attendants and ground crew to baggage handlers and administrative personnel. She herself spent time visiting break rooms at different airports, holding Q&A sessions to hear employees' concerns. The new CEO was on a mission to transform Delta's internal culture, using this crisis as a catalyst for meaningful change. Months slipped by, yet the memory of that fateful slap still reverberated through Delta Airlines and the media at large. For Denise Marshall, life became a series of tense days divided between corporate responsibilities and the legal gauntlet that now involved her as both a victim and a CEO. Reporters hovered outside her office in Atlanta, angled their cameras at every airport she visited, and flooded her press team with requests for comment. She learned to navigate the spotlight with grace, even though her cheeks still seemed to tingle with phantom pain whenever she recalled the moment Martha Perry's hand struck her face. Behind the scenes, the lawsuit against Martha continued to build momentum. Delta's legal team, led by Mark Billings, worked hand-in-hand with outside counsel to consolidate evidence. Whenever Denise thought the well of indignities Martha had inflicted might be exhausted, something new surfaced: emails, social media posts, snatches of overheard conversations from coworkers brave enough to come forward. Each piece painted a darker, more extensive picture of Martha's discriminatory attitudes. In the weeks leading up to the court date, Delta's public relations department juggled two conflicting priorities: preserving the airline's public image and supporting Denise's quest for justice. On one hand, they needed to affirm Delta's commitment to fairness and inclusivity. On the other, they feared the possibility that the trial's courtroom drama could reignite public outrage. But Denise insisted on transparency. "The truth stands on its own," she told Eva Townsend, who headed PR, "I'm not hiding anything. No one should." Meanwhile, Martha Perry found herself in the unfamiliar role of defendant. Having lost her job and enduring public scrutiny, she leaned on her union-appointed counsel to manage her defense. Over time, her circle of friends shrank as many colleagues chose to publicly disavow her. She was forced to move out of her modest apartment near JFK Airport and return to a smaller town upstate, where she lived in the shadow of her crumbling reputation. On the trial's first morning, a crisp wind blew across the courthouse steps. Denise arrived with a small entourage, her legal team, close advisors, and an unshakable resolve. Dressed simply in a black pantsuit, she looked every bit the composed CEO, though she felt the weight of the entire airline on her shoulders. A handful of reporters waited near the entrance, peppering her with questions. She offered no comment beyond a polite, "Good morning." Inside, the corridors smelled of fresh polish and stale coffee. Martha arrived soon after, flanked by her attorney. When her eyes briefly met Denise's, a flicker of something, was it regret or residual anger, crossed Martha's face. She looked thinner, her once sharply pressed uniform now replaced by a plain blouse and skirt that hung loosely, as though her spirit had deflated right alongside her fortunes. Opening statement set the stage for a tense legal battle. The prosecution detailed Martha's racially charged remarks, culminating in physical assault. Defense counsel attempted to portray her as an overworked employee who momentarily snapped under extraordinary stress. They claimed Denise's presence as CEO had intimidated Martha into paranoia. But as the trial proceeded, it became clear that the evidence was overwhelmingly one-sided. Multiple witnesses from Flight 1730 testified, recounting Martha's hostile behavior, her refusal to calm down, and the slap itself. Video footage from a passenger's phone played on a large screen, capturing the exact moment of impact and the stunned horror that followed. On the last day, the jury deliberated for only a few hours. When they re-entered the courtroom, silence fell like a heavy curtain. The judge read the verdict, guilty of assault and battery. Denise allowed herself a single breath of relief, but she did not smile. This wasn't a moment of triumph so much as closure, a public statement that such hatred would not stand unchallenged. Though Martha avoided a lengthy prison sentence, the judge issued a term of probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and a substantial fine. Her criminal record would forever reflect that single reckless moment, an indelible stain on the 15-year career she had once touted. Outside, a small group of onlookers murmured in agreement with the judge's ruling. A few curious spectators recognized Denise and extended supportive nods or whispered thanks for her courage. News outlets quickly circulated the verdict, reinforcing Delta's stance that it had done the right thing by firing Martha. Social media erupted once more, but this time the conversation pivoted to how other airlines might handle similar situations and whether broader reforms were needed across the industry. Denise seized the momentum to strengthen Delta's commitment to equality and customer care. She championed new Safe Skies initiatives that provided deeper cultural sensitivity training for flight attendants, ground crews, and management within Delta. The mood was a paradoxical mix of relief and lingering unease. People were relieved that justice had been served but also sobered by how close they had come to a national scandal. Many found inspiration in Denise's unwavering stance, leading them to reflect on their own biases and behaviors. In break rooms and staff meetings, employees talked openly about the importance of empathy in their daily tasks, from gate check-ins to in-flight service. Denise herself felt a subtle transformation. The incident had opened her eyes not just to external prejudice but to her own vulnerability. The CEO armor she wore was no match for an act of hatred, and that knowledge humbled her. She became more empathetic toward frontline employees, aware of how stress could warp perspective, and worked tirelessly to balance compassion with accountability. When the dust finally settled, Martha Perry faded into the periphery. Rumor had it she struggled to find stable employment and rarely ventured into public spaces where she might be recognized. The professional references she'd once leaned on for new opportunities were unavailable now. Karma, it seemed, had delivered its verdict as forcefully as the gavel in that courtroom. In the wake of the trial, Delta's board of directors publicly reaffirmed their support for Denise, praising how she had navigated a firestorm that could have irreparably damaged the company's reputation. Customer satisfaction soared as travelers saw tangible changes in airline policy, friendlier gate agents, flight attendants trained to diffuse tensions gracefully, and a transparent complaint system that took passenger concerns seriously. Years later, the saga of Flight 1730 would remain a pivotal chapter in Delta's history. Beyond the legal ramifications, it became a testament to how deeply one moment of violence could ripple through a corporation and society at large. For Denise, it served as a profound lesson in both the vulnerability and responsibility of leadership. She often closed her internal speeches by reminding employees, "The sky belongs to all of us. We rise when we rise together, and we can't let ignorance clip our wings." In the end, the hardest truths had been laid bare for all to see. Martha Perry had tried to hide behind excuses only to confront the hardest judge of all, a world that had finally decided enough was enough. For an airline once shaken by a single vicious act, the path toward healing led straight toward unity, compassion, and a fresh wind of accountability that allowed Delta to soar higher than ever before. After all the turbulence, Delta soared to new heights under Denise Marshall's watchful leadership. The shocking slap that once rocked Flight 1730 transformed into a clarion call for zero tolerance against discrimination, on any flight, at any desk, behind any uniform. This story reminds us that true power isn't found in titles or paychecks but in the strength to stand against hatred and lead with empathy. It's a testament that karma comes for those who sow the winds of bigotry, and second chances are hard-earned. If you've been moved by this dramatic tale, don't let the message end here. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that expose hidden injustices and celebrate courage. By spreading the word, you help pave the way for understanding, unity, and a kinder world for us all.